Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Maris from WisPolitics.com. Thanks for attending today. I hope you enjoyed the Wawa Continental Breakfast. I did it myself. Our caterer bailed on me for some reason. I'll have to diagnose that later, so I apologize. If anybody wants a refund because they're not getting a good breakfast, you can come see me. Happy to deliver. But Ken's talk will more than make up. We'll fill you up, so you don't need anything but coffee. And thank you to Claire from AAU for doing the coffee. Come on, let's hear it. So Ken and I are old running mates. We're neighbors in Middleton, Wisconsin, and then of course we're both neck deep in politics. So Ken's always been a good friend, advisor, and counsel on what's really going on in polling. Ken is a pollster himself. And so when Ken's doing an analysis on something, I pay attention. I think that his insight is going to be very helpful today in what is, I guess, the most important election of our lifetime. It seems like every 4 years it is, but this one qualifies as well. So Ken, let's just start off before we talk about some of the survey research you've done. There's a new poll out in Wisconsin, the Bloomberg poll, and shocking, it shows the race for president very close. Trump 47, Biden 46. It seems like that the number hasn't moved much for either of the major candidates. So what's going on?
Yeah, so, everyone always says it's great to be here. It is great to be here. Actually, Jeff was one of the first people I remember meeting when I moved to Madison, and someone connected us, and he was like, he had this idea of this like online politics website, and I was like, I don't know about that. And is Wisconsin going to be politically interesting over the next couple years? And so both things turned out pretty exciting. I've got a fun job, so you shouldn't feel sorry for me, but I do these sorts of presentations, and it is a little bit of a challenge. So it's really close. It's a jump ball. That's what I got. Enjoy the Wawa. So let me try and make that a tad bit smarter, and then we'll Jeff's like, I hope you make that a tad bit smarter, and then let's have a conversation. What's interesting in DC is that, and I hate when people put air quotes, but air quotes on that insight that it's very close and a jump ball, is actually not conventional wisdom among many people in Washington, DC. There sort of seems to be these two cartoonish points of view. One is, like, why are we even talking about this? Have you looked at Joe Biden lately? Have you looked at his job approval numbers? Have you looked at some of the polling? Everything we know about a president who is, struggling to get over 40, and most of his polling is sort of in the mid-30s. There's just like absolutely no way this is going to be a competitive election, right? So that's one school of thought. The other school of thought is there is an anti-MAGA majority in this country. We saw that in 2022. And when people finally begin to focus on the election, we're going to see that anti-MAGA majority emerge. I think sort of for Democrats, it's just going to work out and there's no way Trump can win. You'd think people would be somewhat embarrassed to say that, but apparently many people are not. As we learned in 2022, Republicans and Donald Trump are perfectly able to lose elections that are theirs to lose, right? They're theirs to win. I blew that line. It would have been much funnier, much better, much more insightful, right? 2022's election they should have won, and they managed to lose it. I think we're going to talk about some of the things going on. I didn't even know what first question you were going to ask, and I just popped this up. And this is from January. So we're doing polling here all the time, national polling, state polling in many of the battleground states. But it really hasn't changed very much in the past 5 or 6 months. This was something that we sort of highlighted in 2022, and I still think it's the big story in 2024. So you would typically say, hey, a presidential job approval, at some point, presidential job approval and the vote are going to link up, right? And if his job approval is 37, 38, to make up 12 or 13 percentage points in 5 or 6 months just doesn't happen. But why could Joe Biden win? Why did Democrats win in 2022, including in places like Wisconsin, right, where Biden's job approval was at that lower number, and a number of other Midwest states and other states like Arizona? It's this group of some dis voters. So, do you approve, disapprove of the job Joe Biden's doing as president? Usually you would say the approvers are pretty much going to vote for him, the disapprovers are going to vote against. What we're seeing in every national poll and in every state poll, and in fact if the state poll doesn't show this, it's probably not correct, this asymmetry between strongly approve and strongly disapprove, right? Many more people strongly disapprove of the job Joe Biden's doing than strongly approve. You have a bigger than normal somewhat approval number for him. That 38-40 is his base. They're going to vote for Joe Biden. Typically, that group of somewhat disapprovers would vote against the incumbent. 80-20, 90-10. In a place like Wisconsin in 2022, somewhat disapprovers of Joe Biden voted for Tony Evers. Okay, that's how he won re-election. In this election, that's what's keeping it competitive. That group of somewhat disapprovers, and in this poll, Trump is winning them by 16 percentage points. That's not as high as one should win the people who are disapproving of the incumbent. But then another really important insight, and we'll save other important insights for your other questions. Many of us grew up on national politics. Many of us grew up on Wisconsin politics, where the higher the turnout, the better it is for Democrats. The lower the turnout, the better it is for Republicans. That's flipped. And what you're seeing in lots of national polls is the larger one assumes the electorate, the better Trump does. The more constricted the electorate, the better Biden does. Quick tangent, why is that? Democrats are more likely to be higher educated now. It's also the reason why Democrats did so well in lots of these special elections. Who votes in special elections? Only the really habitual voters who tend to be more Democratic now. But then you see this difference. If somewhat disapprovers are the absolute key group nationally and in the state of Wisconsin, and whoever wins those somewhat disapprovers, or if Biden's competitive with those somewhat disapprovers, he can win Wisconsin, he can win the presidency. Look at the difference in people who are absolutely certain to vote and people who might vote. Biden's actually winning, and this is just among those somewhat disapprovers. People say they're absolutely positively certain to vote. He's winning them by 4 percentage points. If that's the electorate, he wins Wisconsin, he gets reelected. If the electorate's bigger, Trump actually wins those somewhat disapprovers by 16 percentage points.
Okay, what's your explanation for why Biden is having so much trouble, I guess, getting traction or getting back to where that coalition was in 4 years ago? He was able to stitch together a coalition. But, some of my just analysis is like he's doing poorly with the groups that supported him before. If they come back, then he's okay. So what's the explanation?
The second part of the question is easier than the first part of the question,
okay,
but I'll still take
the
first part of the question. Listen, I think it is easy for all of us to be, backseat campaign managers and to think, if he would have just done this or if he would have just given this speech, everything would be okay. That's clearly not the case. So one thing going on is 40's the new 50. Right? I mean, many of you worked in politics and you covered politics, and I don't know if there are any old Tommy Thompson people here, right? Like, he'd freak out if his job approval went below 70, right? And he'd be screaming at his staff. And if his job approval went, below 60,
Right.
You see nobody with a job approval rating of over 50 now. You see no institutions with approval ratings
No, I think
over.
Evers is over 50.
As a job approval?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, well, that would be one of the few. One of the few. So it's just very difficult, and certainly at the national level with things so polarized. Listen, and I'm not. It's such a obnoxious Washington word, but the optics of Joe Biden, are challenging when you look at his. Peter's going, get yourself out of this one. That was pretty charitable, right? The optics are hard as a energetic candidate. He also is not the most disciplined speaker in the world. What people forget about 2020, he certainly won because he gets to run against somebody, and he's going to get to run against somebody again.
Well, he's the one who says, I'm not running against God.
Exactly. The difference is, which makes it more challenging, there's lots of little swing groups you can find, and it's going to be highly correlated with these somewhat disapprovers. But everyone talks about them now, the double haters, right? People who don't like Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And that's between a fifth and a quarter of the electorate. Okay? That was the case in 2016. Donald Trump won, Hillary Clinton lost, because those double haters, you would usually think they won't vote, they'll vote for a third-party candidate, or they'll break evenly. They didn't. They broke massively for Donald Trump. 2020, there weren't a lot of them. Joe Biden actually managed to introduce or reintroduce himself to the American people, and his favorability number was actually pretty high on election day. That's how he won, right? So there was a baked-in vote against Donald Trump, but it was only like 5% of the country didn't like both candidates. Now Biden's got to compete for that 1 in 4, 1 in 5 who dislike both, who probably voted for Trump in 2016, voted for Biden in 2020, and it is not typical, unless you have sort of, Morning in America, that the incumbent does significantly better and grows in support from one election to the next. I don't think there is a magic bullet that the folks in the White House, if they would just do this, he could win.
Well, they've been searching. That's the thing. I mean, it seems like they've been searching and searching for the thing that, gets them going poll-wise. And instead they, gripe about the polling now.
Yeah, which I don't understand. I mean, there's still an absolutely legitimate scenario for Joe Biden to be reelected. The whole notion that, let's not believe the polls, and that the polls, which have always been underestimating Donald Trump, are now suddenly overestimating Donald Trump. I mean, maybe, but that would not be my assumption, especially when we know that more educated people are more likely to do polls, more engaged people are more likely to do polls. All the things we know that are correlated with doing a poll are people who are probably a little bit more likely to not be Donald Trump voters.
Does the Trump trial matter at all? Other than for ratings of certain stations.
So I actually think there is little downside for Donald Trump, even if he's convicted. It's sort of baked into the stock price already. How many times has everyone said, wow, if people knew this about Donald Trump, that's going to be it, right? Or if this happens, that's going to be it. Okay, starting from, John McCain, prisoner of war, and
right.
we can name 40 of them. So Donald Trump gets convicted by a New York district attorney for paying a porn star, and I think most doesn't have much of an impact. The upside for him is if he gets acquitted, do you think he goes, hey, I'm innocent of everything, I've been acquitted for everything I've ever done? I think that's what could happen. So I actually think there's much more upside for him there than downside.
Okay, so back to Wisconsin. What makes Wisconsin such a
What makes
mirror for the
Wisconsin
rest
special?
Well, we know it's special because the Electoral College. If it weren't for the Electoral College, we wouldn't get anybody coming to Wisconsin. But it's a perennial swing state. But what makes it? What are the demographics that make it a mirror to the rest of the country?
So it's not like it's not that Wisconsin looks like America, right? And that, wow, it's, the demographics of America are exactly the demographics of Wisconsin. That's not why it's special. It's special because it's close. That's it, okay? And what are the things that are a bit different about it, even from neighboring states like a Michigan, Ohio, Iowa, et cetera? It is, first, it is a very white state, still one of the more white states. I know we got lots of university people here, and I spent my career at the University of Wisconsin Madison. Number of people with a college education in Wisconsin is actually lower than the national average. Many people don't realize that. And I was just talking to some folks here, and everyone in Washington, D.C. who has never been to Wisconsin, right? Can't really tell the difference between the square states, suddenly is an expert on non-college educated white people in Wisconsin. Never talked to one, never been there, but can sort of talk at length about non-college educated white people in Wisconsin. So there's a lot of them, and that is the base of the Democratic Party. I mean, even for those of you who've worked in politics in Wisconsin, looking at vote totals by county and fewer votes being, Republicans are still winning the WOW counties in Waukesha, but the votes they're coming out of there with, the margins are less, and where Republicans are picking it up is in these out counties. But non-college educated white people in Wisconsin are Republican, but they're a little less Republican than non-college educated white people in other states. I think is one of the key differences there. And then it's just that math that makes it competitive, makes it interesting. And then the fact that I was talking to folks and say, elections and politics just isn't as fun anymore. Well, Wisconsin was an early adopter of making things toxic, okay? So, think of the sort of muscles you've exercised in terms of campaigns. Think of the quality of the voter file on each side, right? If you're in a state that only has a competitive election every couple of years, your targeting, your voter file, all that stuff is just not going to be as good. I mean, my former student Peter is here, who does digital advertising and works with voter file. I mean, he could tell you the names of the 16 swing voters in Wisconsin, okay? And I don't mean percent, right? I mean, it probably literally is 25 or 30,000 people, and the parties know exactly who their bases are.
So,
Peter, who never ever sat in the front row of class his entire career at the University of Wisconsin.
So Dane County is such a big blue plus for Democrats, and it keeps growing, and so it's sort of like the numbers out of Dane County mask the weaknesses of the party outstate and in Milwaukee, where the vote's been slipping. So I guess, we're a purple state, but so much of the Democrats' success seems to depend upon Dane County. And is that a danger for Biden, et cetera?
So it is a danger. It could be sort of a little segue into our discussion of younger voters. But I was talking to Zach before, and you worked on or watched campaigns where you get nice margin out of Dane, but you were looking for that margin out of Milwaukee to wipe out what was going to happen in the WOW counties and other places. As both turnout in Milwaukee has gone down And Democrats are still winning black voters by an overwhelming margin, but there's a difference of winning 98-2 and 85-15, right? There's a huge difference there. And the net votes generated out of, Monica Grove's back there taking notes. She first learned this in Poli-Sci 104 in 2000 and something. The net votes generated out of Dane County is just, phenomenal. And we keep saying like it can't get any more, right? Like if you would have told me that Joe Biden, so I'm talking vote profit advantage, right? That what Obama did in 2012 in Dane, oh my God, that you're never going to reach that. And then Hillary Clinton beat that while she lost Wisconsin, and then Biden even beat that in Dane County. And it's a combination of two things. It is one of the counties in the state that's growing in population, and it's and college-educated white voters are the core of the Democratic Party. But it's a vote-generating machine.
Okay, you want to talk about the young voters, and obviously, a lot of young voters aren't there yet with Biden. If they ever will be, maybe they'll sit it out, or maybe they'll vote for a third-party candidate. So talk about, where they line up with Biden and how he maybe could appeal to them more.
Cool. So Jeff and I have had a 24-year debate about whether I'm allowed to show slides when he interviews me, but I have home field advantage showing a couple. He's laughing because it's true. It's killing him inside that there are slides here. I think the analysis and the punditry of young voters has been so bad. And I think we do not understand young voters, and I also think we have to be careful of what we mean by young.
And voters, right? Yeah.
And voters. So lots of studies out there, and what they'll typically do is they'll glob together 18 to 39-year-olds. Okay? Pretty big range, right? And then maybe they'll glob together 18 to 35-year-olds or 18 to 29-year-olds. What we're seeing is, and we did this here, but what we're seeing is there is a big difference, and for those of you who either are that or have kids who are that, there are real differences between 18 to 22-year-olds, 18 to 24-year-olds, and 25 to 29-year-olds in mental health, in anxiety, in fear, in conspiratorial thinking, in a whole variety of ways.
Or where they get their news.
And where they get their news. Yeah. And I know I have some young people here, so this is in general, it's not you, but the kids are not all right. There is you look at the data, and it's not only political data, but all sorts of data from the NIH, right? And we've done an awesome job on them, right? Toxic politics, COVID, and this thing, which is poison for young people. And so, I'm globbing together 18 to 29-year-olds here, and you see all sorts of punditry out there, which is, because of the war in Gaza, every single young person hates Joe Biden. It is a small subset of people on college campuses, and it's actually even a small subset of people on college campuses, okay? There's been some polling, and most young people, that comes in number 20 on their concerns.
On their issue. Okay.
Now listen, if Wisconsin gets decided by 2,000 votes, or Michigan gets decided by 2,000 votes, everything mattered, okay? But lower turnout and low performance from black voters in Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Detroit is much more likely to have an impact than anything that Biden did or didn't do for younger voters. All of that said, so this is from 2020, and Biden won young voters by 23 percentage points. It's obviously not a national election, but his national margin, about 75-80% of his national margin just came from young voters, okay? Now, there's stuff all over the place now. So you can sort of see that, right? So he he generated 5.7 million votes from that group. There's all sorts of polling out there, right? So Fox News, it's actually a pretty good poll. Spectrum person can write that down. Didn't say anything bad about the Fox poll. It's a good poll. Okay, thanks, you're welcome. Although maybe you guys want to say it's a bad poll because you're competing with them. I'm joking, I'm giving you a hard time. So, they had young people going for Trump by 30 percentage points. Give you lots of nerdy reasons. It's a small sample size. They're weighting to what it should be nationally. They're not looking at the particular demographics of that group, but that's a pretty big number. The Marquette poll, which is the best poll, because Charles Franklin knows what he's doing, okay, had it at plus 10. If you look at the Catalyst, which is a Democratic voter file group, their analysis has Biden winning them by 25 points in 2020. New York Times Siena poll has it at 6. We did a little experiment. I think this is going to bring you around to slides. You liking this? It's good?
It's okay. You just have to keep them simple for me.
Okay, good. Changing the world here. We did an experiment, and when I say we, I'll point to Giacomo, who's back there. Wave, Giacomo, who works with me here at AAU, who does all the nerdy stuff. If you look at just sort of a non-probability, big national survey, which is what most polls you are seeing are doing. Okay, so the Harris poll is non-prob, the Morning Consult Bloomberg is non-prob, just about everything you're seeing is non-prob. Okay? You do just like a non-prob, and you don't, it's sort of a little nerdy, you don't weight the younger voters to be what the younger voters should be in terms of their demographics. You're just pulling out the young voters from your general study. You have Trump winning by 15. Okay? If you do nested weights with the non-prob, it's a little bit less, but about the same. We then did an experiment where, okay, all the young people, what's the only way you communicate on this thing, right? If I'm going to get in touch with you, are you going to answer the phone? Never, in a million years, okay? You don't even know this works as a phone, okay? Like you can exactly, what's a phone? You can talk in it. It's a technology where we text. We're doing it off the voter file, so we think that's the best way to get a representative group of young people. We show Biden winning by 9 percentage points. So if you're the Biden campaign, if you're a Dem, that's good news, bad news. Good news is you're not down 30 like Fox says, because if you're down 30, I don't even know what we're talking about covering a presidential election, right? So you're not down 30. It's probably like you're more like up 9, but up 9 is not up 23. Okay, and that is a big difference. Plus, you worry about turnout.
So is the difference here RFK Jr.? I mean, did you do a?
Well, we asked RFK Jr. in each of these, so that's held constant. The difference is how you're contacting young voters and whether you're weighting the young voters to what the demographics of young voters are.
Okay, so I guess how important is RFK Jr. in the vote for the 18 to 29-year-olds?
Yeah, so I think it's so the third party person always does better in the polling and tends to come down. But if you are fearful, disaffected, angry, don't like the really two really old guys who are running, RFK is your empty piece of paper for you to fill in whatever you want. I mean, there's some discussion on it. All of the evidence I've seen, or not all of the evidence, most of the evidence I have seen suggests that RFK on the ballot hurts Trump, helps Biden.
because, explain that. People, is there what's the main reason you think?
So the main reason is people who want to cast, maybe more complicated than this, but people who want to cast an anti-Biden vote can then cast that vote for RFK Jr.
Without voting for Trump.
Without voting for Trump. Okay. So I can...
No, that's okay. So Chuck Todd was here. The last time we were at AAU, Chuck Todd was here. And he when he was talking about Wisconsin, he says what he would be worried about for Democrats would be the undermining that vote in Dane County, that big blue vote, to going to Jill Stein and Cornel West and RFK Jr., that what you just said would be happening, and that would undermine Biden's big margin there. Is that what we're seeing here? We have two unpopular candidates from the two main parties. So, maybe it's a real thing this year.
Yeah. So listen, the thing about Wisconsin, Trump won by 25,000 votes,
no,
and then Biden won by 30,000 votes.
No, 20. Yeah, he won by 20, and about 20 either way.
20 either way. So you had, everything matters. I still think that black turnout going down a little bit in Milwaukee, and black voters voting. People you don't intuitively, your mind do it. You say hey, Obama won black voters in Milwaukee 98-2. Joe Biden is going to win black voters 85-15. What's the difference? That seems like the Democrats winning overwhelmingly. Well, the difference is 98 minus 2 is 96 versus 85 and 15 is 70, right? So that means that for every 100 black voters, Joe Biden is getting 26 fewer on the margin. That, I think, ends up mattering. Again, everything's going to matter if it's that close. That matters more than 2% of people voting for Jill Stein in Dane County.
Okay, so you're not seeing this as the Clinton-Bush-Ross-Perot election.
I am not seeing this as the Clinton-Bush-Ross-Perot election, but that's a good question. And not all your questions are good. So
let's hear it from me. I got one in. I got at least one good question.
No, but the other ones are pretty good as well. Listen, Ross Perot, I actually think it's an under-analyzed and appreciated fact about 92 and 96. I think Ross Perot won the election for Bill Clinton.
Right.
I really do, and I think that's understudied. This whole notion that the Ross Perot voters were sort of both, go to a Ross Perot rally. They were Republicans.
Yeah.
Okay, and they took much more from George W. Bush. Sort of doing the three-dimensional chess of Jill Stein and Cornel West and RFK Jr. and who they're taking more from. Cornel West and Jill Stein. Probably taking a little bit from Biden, but the people who are going to vote for them are, a different sort of group anyways. And then RFK, probably a little bit more from Trump. But at the end of the day, as it all washes, you're not talking about nets of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of votes nationally.
Okay, so obviously you have more slides, Ken.
But I don't have to show them.
No, you should. You should. You curated your slides. I think we want to see them. No, this is an important, obviously, again, Wisconsin's a very white state, but the black vote, mostly in southeastern Wisconsin, is really important.
Yeah. So these are national data, but sort of the patterns, you can do the math in different states. So Joe Biden won by a margin. You can add it up, right? So 16, 18 million. So Joe Biden won nationally by about 4 million votes. Okay. He did plus 14 million among black voters. Okay. That's incredible in terms of sort of vote generating. So if you just do some scenarios, and this is sort of similar to what we did with the younger voters, again, you sort of get this cartoonish analysis. Young voters are all voting for Trump. They're not. But if turnout's a little bit less and they're a little bit less loyal to Biden, that can really hurt them. And you look at the difference in net votes generated for black people. If it's, and actually let's go to this one. Obama wins black voters by 16 million votes in 2012. Clinton wins black voters by 14.4 million votes in 2016. That underperformance cost her the presidency in places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Okay? Biden actually does better than Hillary Clinton and just a little bit worse than Barack Obama in 2012. If you go to sort of like the New York Times February poll, right, which was 78-22, which it's probably not going to be, that means that Democrats only net 9 million votes from black voters, and they got to make up 14 or 15 million deficit from white voters. Okay? If you just take it to 85-15, that's 3 million fewer net votes for black voters. So, a lot of people sort of rolled their eyes when folks were talking about how Donald Trump was doing much better than you would expect with black voters and especially Latino voters. There's a lot of eye rolling about that. That is a thing. What I'm not saying is Donald Trump's going to win black voters. What I'm not saying is that black voters are not by far the most loyal Democratic constituency, next to college professors. But a little bit of attrition, black voters, younger voters, makes it some very challenging math in these states. And so when we're talking about, polling, right? Think of the state of Wisconsin, right? Someone does a poll, and for those of you who've done a poll in the state of Wisconsin, 600 or 700 doing the poll, you get 30 or 40 black people to answer your survey.
Oh yeah, when they're doing analysis on black voting in Wisconsin, the sample size is tiny.
Right. Plus they probably weighted it up.
Yeah, right.
So you're going to get all this noise, but there's a huge difference in a couple percentage points either way. So I think that's a lot of, again, don't feel sorry for me, I have a pretty fun job, but that's a lot of the challenge of polling also when these components.
Okay, before we go to questions from the audience, this is a good thing to say. What is this, how healthy is polling right now? Are these problems insurmountable? We're always saying, wow, the sample size is tiny, and then, people are making a lot of assumptions based on that. You're having to wait for, non-college whites, constantly, and, wait for black votes constantly. What's, in a few phrases, what's the state of polling these days?
For 30 years, right, people would say, oh, polling's dead, this is the last election.
Yeah, right.
And I have not. I am really concerned about the quality and representativeness of respondents, and the consistency you're seeing in the polling is mostly due to the fact that everybody's with Pollster is, putting their thumb on it, doing pretty significant, weighting, modeling of what's going on, and there are assumptions, there. If we're using polling to try and measure a race that's going to be within a percentage point, no way. Absolutely don't trust it. Yeah, flip a coin. 100% flip a coin. For sort of like general directional stuff, right? Like, do I believe that Joe Biden's job approval is not that great? Yes. Do I believe that more people strongly disapprove of him than approve of him? Yes. Do I believe there's been an increase here and a decrease here? Yes. So sort of for these general directional things, absolutely. But to think we're going to be in a world where you're calling these races to the percentage point is dopey.
Okay, let's go to questions from the audience, and Wendy is here to assist with the magic cube.
The magic cube. The AAU magic cube.
The AAU, yeah, it's branded. It's branded.
Is this a microphone? Very cool. All right. Good morning. I'm Brian Carey from WPS. I have a question. I know issues like abortion and gun control are important in every election. I feel like with some of the big changes that have occurred in areas around gun control and abortion recently, that it could be a bigger factor in this election. How do you guys feel like that might swing things, given how close it's going to be?
So I think abortion hasn't been a big issue, right? It just became a big issue, and there was always asymmetry that the gun issue would have much more of an impact than the abortion issue. I'm doing a little zigging and zagging on my analysis of the abortion issue. I think there were people who said that they thought abortion was the key reason why Democrats did well in 2022, but they think it's going to be less of an impact in 2024. I think the opposite. Many of the problem for Republicans with abortion in 2022 was it was paired with candidates of not the highest quality who said goofy things, okay? And there were Republicans who still won in races where the candidate was a little bit better. Like, was it abortion or was it, Kerry Lake, okay? I do think that, and I don't think it's necessarily like the political magic of, hey, let's put an abortion referendum on the ballot and we'll get higher turnout from these people. And then I don't think it's so much that, but you can see in what Trump is trying to do with abortion. And he actually stepped into it a little bit yesterday. He said something about birth control, which he had to walk back pretty significantly. That the Republican Party on abortion and listen, Wisconsin's a great example. There would be support in the state for a 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-week abortion ban, okay? If Republicans would have passed that, that would have put Tony Evers, I would put Democrats in the state legislature in a big pickle because they can't support it, but there's support for that. Instead,
Yeah, whoops, here we go.
turn it on.
The Assembly Speaker, Robin Vos, tried that, and then the more conservative Senate didn't take it up.
Said no way, right? So that is not giving permission to the stereotypical white Republican woman from Waukesha County to do what she wants to do, which is vote Republican, but it's not giving her permission to vote Republican. That sort of thing, I think is more likely to matter.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
This is strange. My question has to do with the wording of question asked. I appreciate that all the news the last few years has been how do you reach the right voter for representation and consistency, and I know the importance of asking the same question election after election so you can compare it to past data. But I can't help but wonder if asking a question differently, in other words, not asking directly, who would you vote for today, would get you more predictable, better results. For example, in the world of psychology, we know that how I feel about Jeff really is determined by how I think he feels about me. So rather than asking,
Let's get into this.
because, for example, if I said, you would ask me if would I vote for Jeff today. But if you ask me instead, how do I feel Jeff feels about me, I might vote differently. When Hillary called many folks, deplorable, a lot of folks conversationally said, I'm not going to vote for her because she thinks ill of me. So I know there's a risk in changing the questions because it changes the data. But what's the research out there about asking questions differently?
Yeah, so there's sort of two questions.
You should say that is a good question.
That was a good question. Yeah. You're just trying to get her to like you, so she'll vote for you. Very transparent. It is a good question, and it's really two questions. One is, we talk about a lot, sort of there's this notion, the trend is your friend. Don't change the question wording because it's going to make it not comparable. And so sometimes you stick with a not perfect question because you want to trend it. I actually worry about that less than most people, just because, really, I'm going to worry about changing a question now on my non-probability, heavily weighted poll in 2024 so I can compare it to the 1952 in-person probability study that was done in person. Of all the things that are different, the 3 words that you changed are not the biggest of deals. Sometimes I'm sort of pointing to Giacomo, we end up keeping it because it looks nice on our slide when we're showing it to a university that we can trend it. But we are less fearful of changing question wording. Now the second part of your question is so I do think asking people's feelings, asking people's affective, the Hillary Clinton is interesting. But for that to be a better question, you'd have to have someone tell me that they don't like that Hillary Clinton called them deplorable, but they're still going to vote for her. I still think, even with all the imperfection of the horse race question, it's the most accurate way of doing it. There's different ways of asking it. There's this USC national poll, and I can't even remember. They have some other way of asking the vote question. But at the end of the day, of all the things wrong with polling, I think the who you're going to vote for is not the one.
Next question.
And let me sort of add on one more thing. I also am not of. I actually don't think people lie to pollsters that much. I think there might be a lot of AI bots talking to pollsters. That's a whole other issue. I think it's more that the people who don't want to answer our questions aren't talking to us in the first place. They're not lying, right? So in 2016, it wasn't so much that people were embarrassed to say they were voting for Donald Trump, so they said they were voting for Hillary Clinton. It was that the people who were voting for Donald Trump didn't do our surveys in the first place.
Hi, I'm a student from Madison, and my question was more so to do with polling altogether than this specific poll. But I was just wondering, outside of political parties and them using polling data to change their strategies, what do you think is the significance of polling overall? Is it better for just looking at historical trends or researching what happened in past elections?
Yeah, it's another good question. The things polling is most interesting and useful for are not what's covered, right? And we can all sit up here and say, well, actually, don't look at the ballot question. What you really need to do is look at the internals, and I actually don't even look at the horse race question.
I was going to say, right, or could you ever do a poll that didn't have the horse race question?
Right, bullshit, right? It's the first thing that everybody looks at. But I do think broadly it is a way to see how attitudes have changed in the mass public. And listen, the other choice is Jeff Mayer's walking around talking to 4 people for his story and then generalizing. And I'm all for the sort of the old style David Broder of talking to real people. And in some ways, I don't think we do that enough. But you do see people overgeneralizing. Okay, how many people, you might have even said this. Oh, I knew 2016. I was taking an Uber from O'Hare Airport, and my driver said this, and that's when I knew he was going to win. I'm like, okay, really? Did you tell anybody that? As we think about democracy, as lots of people say what the American public thinks, I do still think that good polling has an important role in our democracy. And again, not just saying this because you're at Marquette, not just saying this because he's my buddy. Charles Franklin's polling is really high quality. He knows that the catnip is the horse race, okay? He knows that as good as he is, he sort of fell into it with Wisconsin being this state, and so everyone cares about it, and then you add on to that a high quality individual and a high quality poll. As policymakers and as citizens in the state of Wisconsin, you have tens of thousands of high quality interviews going back years of what the people of Wisconsin actually think, not what other people are telling you think, and that's important for democracy.
Yeah, I also, I'm going to chime in here. The effect on public policy is enormous. I think that when a trend line shows something, politicians react to that.
Gay marriage.
That was one of the biggest turnarounds in polling history in Wisconsin. Or the legalization of marijuana is probably another one.
Yeah.
But really the gay marriage one is, I mean, we once had a ballot measure put on by Republicans in the fall campaign on the gay marriage question, for the purposes of driving turnout.
Yeah.
Conservative turnout.
No, I mean, you and I are old enough to remember
we're old.
when all of the punditry was how Democrats were never going to win another national election because they were on the wrong side of the gay marriage issue.
Right. So, anyway.
I've got the last question, given the time. I like to take the last question as long as I'm holding the mic. Ken, I know in your past life you did a little bit with advertising as well as looking at those political ads. So I'm going to have you bring all of this together.
I'm looking at Monica, her eyes like starting to twitch because she used to work for me coding ads, and she would like sit in the basement coding ads. That's why she's wearing glasses now.
We know negative ads, positive ads, all of that. When you look at that, we just had an election in West Virginia and Maryland with primaries. Virginia has an election coming up. I have been inundated with text messages, and I still subscribe to cable, so I saw all kinds of cable news ads. Does this help, hurt? Is this all about who's spending the most money? Like, do advertisements make a difference when it comes to the polls?
Yeah, so, God, I wish I was David Trone's media buyer. So he's I would have made a lot of money, right? So Total Wine, guy ran for Senate, spent $65 million.
And lost.
And lost, right? Stepped on the lead, as folks in journalism would say. There is no more inefficient, poorly understood use of money than political advertising. Okay? And I'm not joking when I say there's probably 50,000 voters in play in the state of Wisconsin. And the way digital markets work and just TV is just expensive and inefficient to reach those 50s, the cost per vote of reaching those people is staggering. I keep looking at Peter here, who actually knows what he's talking about. Am I doing okay so far? Okay, good. You'll let me know if I'm not? All right. That said, if you knew, so when does advertising matter? At the margin, okay? It's not moving things 10 percentage points, 20 percentage points, even 5 percentage points, maybe 1 or 2 percentage points. And back when I used to research this stuff, that's what it showed. And it was also heterogeneous in its effect, right? You get all sorts of like stupid debates. Is it persuasion or is it turnout? Well, the answer is both. Even in this world where there's probably not an opportunity to do a lot of persuasion, it's still really valuable. Why is that? If I get you to vote, that's +1 for me. If I switch you, that's +2. Okay? So it makes the premium on reaching those people tremendous. It's such a small number. The effect is so small that it's almost imperceptible. What I can say that the $100 million ad that you spent is probably not having much of a marginal impact. So you get tremendous wastage. But I'll tell you what a campaign manager is thinking, and some of you might have been campaign managers who are doing this. You know what I'm not going to get yelled at about? If I spent a bunch of money on TV the last weekend in a close media market. And so you're going to continue to see, I mean, even more than I wish I was David Trone's ad buyer, I wish I owned a TV station in Milwaukee. Any of you guys own a TV station in Milwaukee or Green Bay?
Yeah.
I mean, good grief, if I could go back in time, when I moved, like I was like, wow, this WisPolitics thing's interesting. Cool, I'm going to buy a couple TV stations in Wisconsin. That would have worked out better for me.
Yeah.
You're still going to have massive amounts of money chasing those very, very few swing voters. And what's interesting, and I keep sort of half jokingly looking at Peter, you actually, Democrats and Republicans can actually talk and get along, and right and left, and Israel and Hamas. Just don't have like a digital media buyer and a TV media buyer in the same room, because those guys really fight it out about campaign budget.
Okay, so we're concluding here now. But before you applaud for Ken, I just want to say on September 17th is our next breakfast, and hopefully the catering will come through. I'm confident it will, because we're having it at the Aspen Center. So I know that Paul, you'll do a better job than I did on that. But anyway, we're going to have Charles Franklin, Craig Gilbert, and a couple of other smart people to talk about the fall elections. And then I want to thank our sponsors, of course, Michael Best and Michael Best Strategies, UW-Madison, Marquette University and the Aspen Center, WPS Health Solutions, Xcel Energy, and the Wisconsin Alumni Association. So thanks to our sponsors, thanks to Ken, thanks to all of you.